A family story from Virginia's. I wiped flour from my hands, finishing up the last dish for Christmas dinner when the living room lit up with cheers. Through the frosted window, I saw my son Ethan, 38, standing tall. He dangled a set of keys, and beside him my daughter-in-law Clara clapped like a child at a carnival. In front of them, gleaming under the Christmas lights, sat a brand-new BMW, black as midnight, a red bow spread across its hood. Ethan's voice cut through the winter air. "Merry Christmas, Mom," he beamed, calling not to me but to his mother-in-law Helen, who cried out with pride as though she had just been crowned. Clara wrapped her arms around her mother, glowing. I froze, looking at my son gave his mother-in-law a BMW. And me? What I got was an envelope. Inside, a $20 grocery voucher. My heart stuttered. $20. After the tuition bills, the wedding loans, the down payment I helped cover, $20? I forced a smile when he gave, because that's what mothers do. But inside, I asked myself, when did I become the background in my own son's life? How did I end up as Mom Dot, while Helen became simply Mom? My name is Dorothy Miller, 70, a widow, living in a modest house in Virginia. That night, staring at the glow of a BMW in the snow, I felt the ground shift beneath me. Subscribe if you like this kind of story. The living room glowed with warm Christmas lights, but to me it felt cold. Outside, snow dusted the shiny BMW parked proudly in the driveway, its red bow glowing like a crown. Inside, Helen sat on the sofa, her hand caressing the new car keys as if they were a jewel. My daughter-in-law Clara poured her mother another glass of wine, her voice bright with pride. "Mom, you deserve this. Finally, a gift that matches everything you've done for me." Her mom, Helen, smiled widely, smug and satisfied. "You're lucky, Clara." Ethan's a good man. Not every son-in-law would go this far for his mother-in-law. I sat a few feet away, on the hard wooden chair near the fireplace, holding the $20 grocery voucher in my lap. My son, the boy I raised for 38 years, was grinning at another woman. I wanted him to look at me, just once, but he didn't. Instead, Ethan shrugged, cracking open a beer. Mom Dot doesn't need fancy things. She likes to keep it simple. Saving money, that's the kind of gift she really appreciates. The words hit me like ice water. Simple? Saving money? That's all I am to you now? The woman who scraped together every penny for your tuition, for your wedding, for the down payment on your first house? Clara glanced at me, her smile polite but dismissive. "He's right, Mom. You don't have to worry about these things. Let us, the younger ones, handle the big stuff. You can just relax." Helen leaned forward, her tone sweet but cutting. "Dorothy, at our age, we should let the kids take care of us. And Ethan, he's shown he understands what really matters. That car out there, it's proof of his love." Love. I stared at them, my hands tightening around the little voucher. So love is measured in horsepower and leather seats? Then what's this in my lap? $20 worth of affection? I forced myself to speak, though my voice trembled. "Ethan, don't you think love, real love, is shown in more than just expensive gifts?" Ethan's smile faded. His jaw tightened. "Mom, please. Don't make this complicated. I did what I thought was right for my family. You don't need to understand every detail, the way he said my family stung. Since when did I stop being part of that family, Ethan? Was it after Tom passed? Or when Clara came into the picture? When did I go from the center of your life to just an afterthought?" Helen leaned back, twirling the keyring as if she'd already claimed her victory. Clara clung to Ethan's arm, glowing with pride. And me? I sat with a $20 voucher, feeling like a guest at my own table. The fire crackled, casting shadows on the walls. I looked down, hiding my face, but inside something shifted. Maybe I am old. Maybe they think I'm irrelevant. But I know one thing. I still matter. And I won't sit here quietly while they write me out of my own story. The living room buzzed with voices, Clara's excitement, Helen's laughter, Ethan's low murmur, but to me it was all distant, muffled, like I was underwater. I stared down at the $20 voucher in my lap, a slip of paper so light in my hands, yet it pressed against me like the sum of every sacrifice I had ever made. The flames in the fireplace snapped and cracked. I fixed my gaze on them, and the years began to fold back. It was the winter of 1989. Our old furnace had given out, and the house felt more like a refrigerator than a home. The thermostat read 40 degrees inside. Ethan was only 7. His little hands were cracked from the cold, his breath visible in the air. I remember crouching by the lamp, sewing patches onto his threadbare coat. My fingers were stiff from the chill. I had given him the last blanket. My own shoulders shook through the night, but I kept stitching. As long as he's warm, I whispered to myself, I can handle the cold. I smiled when he woke up, bundled in that patched-up coat. He never knew I'd spent the night shivering. And now? Now he stood outside, grinning as another woman turned the key of a brand-new BMW, while I sat here with a coupon book like some afterthought. The fire sparked again, and I was carried into another memory. 1997. Ethan's first year at college. Back then, I was working 12-hour night shifts as a nurse, $11 an hour. Every paycheck, I'd scraped together $2,000 to cover his tuition. I skipped meals, stretched leftovers for days, even stuffed cardboard into my worn-out shoes when the soles gave out. Each time I mailed that tuition check, my chest ached, not from regret, but from pride. This is my blood, my hours, my back, I told myself, but my boy will have a future. I imagined him in classrooms, raising his hand with confidence, building the kind of life his father and I could only dream of. And now? He hands $60,000 to his mother-in-law as if money is air, and he hands me 20. The hardest memory arrived without warning. The day Tom died. The silence after was suffocating. No heavy boots on the doorstep, no laughter over Saturday pancakes, no soft hum of his favorite jazz records. Just me and the tick-tock of the grandfather clock. I remember mowing the lawn in July heat, sweat dripping down my back. I remember climbing onto the roof in the fall, hammering shingles with trembling hands. Alone. Always alone. At least I still have Ethan, I whisper to myself at night. At least I'm not completely alone. But looking around this evening, with Helen perched on my sofa like royalty, and Clara clinging to Ethan's arm like he'd conquered the world, I wondered if even that comfort had slipped away. The fire popped, a log shifting. My grip on the voucher tightened. Back then, every sacrifice felt worth it. Every dollar I saved, every night I worked instead of sleeping, every ache in my bones. It all built a bridge for Ethan's future. But when did he stop crossing that bridge back to me? When did I stop being home and start being the background? I wanted to forgive him. God help me, I did. He's my son, always my son. My heart still softened at the sight of him, but another voice inside me was sharper, colder. It whispered, "You gave everything, and now you're being erased." The firelight flickered across the room, casting long shadows that made Helen's smile look sharper, Clara's laugh harsher. I endured hunger. I endured cold. I endured losing Tom, I thought. My jaw tightened. But I will not endure being erased. I lifted my chin, looking past the warm lights on the tree, past the snow outside, straight at that red-bowed car gleaming in the driveway. The voucher trembled in my fist. I wasn't just the mother who sacrificed, I was the woman who survived. And I would remind them of that, no matter what it took. Morning came thin and pale, the kind of winter light that makes a clean kitchen look tired. The house was finally quiet, no laughter, no clinking glasses, just the low hum of the fridge and the steady tick of Tom's old clock. Cinnamon still hung in the air from yesterday, sweet and stale at the same time. I moved plate to plate, scraping food no one bothered to take home. My fingers felt raw from hot water and soap. Through the window, I could see 2 narrow tire tracks cutting across the new snow, where the BMW had purred away, like scars on my yard. On the island, I lined up the wine glasses to dry. A glossy trifold brochure peeked from beneath a napkin. New year, new equity. Smart ways seniors can leverage their homes. A stock photo of a woman my age smiled with 2 white teeth, a young couple at her shoulder. I swallowed. Last night, Helen had laughed and said, "At our age, Dorothy, we should let the kids handle the big things." I'd smiled back because that's what you do when a guest stands in your kitchen and tells you how to live. I started to slide the brochure into the recycling, and that's when I saw the other paper. Folded once, crisp, with the faint red crest of First Federal in the corner. I almost brushed it aside. Then I caught the name at the top. Ethan Miller. I wiped my hands on a dish towel and unfolded it carefully, the way you open a letter that might change your life. Loan agreement approved. Principal, $58,700. APR, 7.99%. Term, 72 months. First payment, due, January 15th. My breath snagged. $58,700. A number that sat beside last night's 60,000 like two pieces of a puzzle no one wanted solved. Outside, a breeze tapped the icicles against the gutter. Inside, the refrigerator's hum seemed louder, the clock faster, like the room had a heartbeat and it had started a race. I flattened the document on the counter, palm steadying paper that didn't want to be held. "So, what paid for that BMW, Ethan?" I whispered. "Not savings. Not a bonus. Debt." The kettle on the stove began to murmur, not quite a whistle, the sound a soft warning. I turned the flame down and looked again at the fine print. Late fees, penalties, a neat schedule of payments marching 6 years into the future. A yellow sticky note clung to the back page, written in Clara's tidy hand. Wednesday, 2 p.m., FF Credit Union with Mom H. Ask about senior options, title transfer. The kettle finally whistled, sharp, sudden, and I jumped. I killed the burner and let the whistle die. For a long moment, I just stood there, loan in one hand, sticky note in the other, the brochure smiling up at me with that promise of ease. Last night, Helen had set her wine glass down right where I was standing now and told me, almost tenderly, responsible people leverage what they have. I'd nodded because I am responsible. I have always been. But leverage isn't the same as love. My phone buzzed on the counter, a voicemail from an unknown number, then the transcript blinked to life. "Dorothy, dear, it's Helen. Thank you again for a lovely evening. We should chat soon about simplifying things. I have wonderful people at the credit union who help women our age. Restructure. It's really quite liberating. Call me." I set the phone down as if it were hot. I wasn't sure yet, not with proof I could take to a bank manager or a judge. But the picture was changing. The brochure, the sticky note, the voicemail, and this loan that matched the bow on last night's generosity. Small cracks in a glossy surface. Cracks spread, under paint, under plaster, through foundations. You don't see the collapse all at once. You feel the draft first. I slid the documents into a plain manila folder and tucked it deep in the drawer with the warranties and birth certificates. My hands shook only a little. Hold steady, I told myself, the way I used to in the ER at 3 a.m. when the monitors screamed and everyone looked to the oldest nurse in the room. Breathe. Watch. Verify outside. Snow began to fall again. Soft, steady, innocent to anyone not watching closely. Inside, I poured hot water over a tea bag and stared at the folder in the drawer as if it might move. Maybe I am old, I thought, but I know a warning when I hear one, and I won't pretend I didn't hear it. The storm clouds had cleared by afternoon, leaving the yard white and silent. I had just set down 2 mugs of cocoa when I heard the shuffle of sneakers on the stairs. David, my grandson, came bounding into the kitchen, cheeks flushed from video games and leftover Christmas candy. He plopped into the chair across from me, tearing at the marshmallows with a spoon. His legs swung back and forth, restless energy, in a boy who never quite sat still. I smiled, trying to shake off the morning's discovery. "Slow down, sweetheart." "Cocoa tastes better when it's sipped." David shrugged. "Grandma Helen says she's going to drink cocoa here all the time anyway. She said soon she won't even need to drive over." The spoon clattered from my hand, cocoa splashing onto the table. I leaned in, my voice softer than I intended. "What did you say, David?" He blinked, a marshmallow stuck to his lip. "Grandma Helen said she's moving in here. Like, into this house. She said she'll have her own room. Probably the one with the big window." The room tilted. The hum of the refrigerator roared in my ears. Moving in. My house. My Tom's house. I forced a smile so I wouldn't frighten him. "And when did she tell you that, honey?" "Last night, after you went to bed. She said she'll be closer to us, and she won't have to worry about her old place anymore. She was really happy. She winked at me and told me to keep it a secret." David giggled, proud of himself for keeping the promise until now. I reached across the table, covering his small hand with mine. "Thank you for telling me, sweetheart. Sometimes grown-ups say things they shouldn't around kids. But I'm glad you told me." He smiled, already distracted, and dashed upstairs again, leaving the kitchen echoing with silence. I stayed seated, cocoa cooling in front of me, my palm pressed against the table where his little hand had been. So Helen had been making plans. Plans that included my home, my rooms, my life, spoken freely to a 12-year-old before spoken to me. The morning's loan paper burned in my memory. Now this. I felt my chest tighten. She's not just visiting, she's circling, like a hawk looking for where to land. Through the window, the sky was darkening again, clouds heavy with new snow. The house, once my sanctuary, suddenly felt smaller, as though walls were closing in around me. The voucher still lay in the drawer. The loan paper, too. And now a child's innocent words. Simple, harmless, but sharper than any accusation. I whispered to myself, steady and low. So, Helen, you've already picked your room. My suspicions, once just flickers, now had a face and a name, and the crack in the surface was spreading faster than I feared. By late afternoon, the snow had softened to slush along the curb. Clara stopped by, just to grab the casserole dish, cheeks pink from the cold, hair tucked into a neat wool cap. I wiped the counter and set the kettle. The house felt overly tidy, as if it were waiting for a verdict. Tea? I asked. Sure, she said, slipping off her gloves. I can't stay long. Mom's got an appointment tomorrow. With the credit union? I kept my tone light. The sticky note from this morning burned in my memory. She blinked, then smiled. Yeah, just options. I placed her cup on a coaster. Clara, about last night, David said something sweet today. He's excited. He thinks your mom will be here a lot more. I watched her face. He said she might even have a room. Clara looked down, smoothing a water ring with her thumb. He talks too much, she said softly, then forced a laugh. Kids. Silence held for a breath. The kettle began to whisper. I want to understand, I said. Help me understand. Clara took the cup but didn't drink. Mom had a hard year, she began, voice low. The Richmond townhome, she tried to flip it. Prices dipped. She took a bridge loan, $75,000, thinking she'd close quick. Then the contractor bailed. HOA started sending letters. She covered 2 months, then it snowballed. She short-sold in August, lost almost $50,000. Her credit score dropped, 19 points in a week. She exhaled. She doesn't say it out loud, but she's scared. 50,000. A bridge loan. HOA letters. The numbers lined up like footprints in fresh snow. I nodded slowly. I'm sorry she went through that. Clara's shoulders softened. Me too. She's proud. She'd never ask for help, so we're trying to show up for her. The car was... She hesitated, searching. A reset. A way to say, you still matter. And a way to buy silence, I thought, or to buy permission. I kept that inside. And the title? I asked, as if I were asking about grocery brands. David mentioned rooms. The credit union sticky note said title transfer. What does that mean to you? Clara lifted her eyes. A flicker of something, guilt, moved across her face. It's not what you think, she said. It's just efficiency. If Mom's going to be here more, if we're helping with bills, it makes sense to have things consolidated. Ethan said putting her on the deed could help with certain tax things, estate stuff. She glanced toward the hallway. It would still be your home. Obviously, I answered in my head, though nothing about this felt obvious. Consolidated, efficient. Words that move furniture without asking who's sitting in the chair. Consolidated, I repeated aloud. Would that mean she could make decisions about the property? Clara sat straighter, the polite smile back in place. Only the smart ones. She's been through this before. She knows the paperwork. It would take pressure off you, Dot. You've done so much already. I set my cup down carefully. Did Ethan tell you how he paid for the BMW? Her jaw tightened, just a breath. He said he had it covered. He did, I said softly. With a loan. $58,700. Approved 3 weeks ago, Clara's fingers went still on the cup. Steam broke and drifted between us. It's temporary, she said. We'll refinance. Once Mom's settled, we'll have leverage with the bank. Stability. Lenders like that. Stability. From my deed, I thought. A chill moved up my arms that had nothing to do with the weather. When were you thinking? I asked. For the room. For the title by spring, she said. Before the credit hit us again. We're meeting Wednesday, just to ask questions. She lifted the cup, took a sip she clearly didn't want. Dot, the car wasn't about showing off. It was about telling Mom she's not a failure. We're trying to help her start over, her voice softened. You of all people know what starting over feels like. The words landed where they were meant to, the hollow place Tom left. Yes. I know starting over. I also know the difference between help and a hand in your pocket. I do know, I said, but starting over shouldn't mean erasing where someone else already began. Clara looked at me, wounded and defensive in the same breath. We're not erasing you. Then why am I being written in pencil? Rose up in me sharp as a thorn, but I swallowed it. She reached for the casserole dish on the counter, metal scraping softly on tile. I should go? The roads are getting messy. Clara, I said. She paused. If your mother needs a room, we'll find a way to make her feel welcome. But my husband's study has a bay window your son loves to sit in. It's not a spare place on a floor plan to me. I held her gaze. It's a life. Clara's eyes flicked away. I understand, she murmured, though I wasn't sure she did. At the door, she turned back. Ethan loves you, she offered, as if that were a receipt she could slide across the counter. I know he does, I said. But love without truth is just wrapping paper. The door closed. The house sighed. I stood in the quiet, listening to the clock. When did this distance set in? Was it when Sunday dinners turned into quick texts? Rain check, Mom? When Mom became Mom Dot? When I started hearing about my son's life through his wife and then through his wife's mother? I opened the drawer and laid a hand on the manila folder. The loan, the sticky note, the brochure. David's words echoed, she said she'll have her own room. I pictured Tom's study, the bay window, the dent in the leather chair where he used to read the sports page. I could almost see Helen's suitcase against that wall. Number. The thought stiffened my spine. Number. Cocoa rings marked the coaster. The kettle clicked as it cooled. Outside, a plow rattled past, pushing gray snow to the curb. Inside, the shape of the problem was finally visible. Not just debt, not just pride, but a plan. A plan with my address on it. And I felt something old and steady return, an instinct honed over years of emergencies on night shift. Assess, secure, document. Love my son, yes. But protect the house that kept him warm, and the woman who kept the heat on. I washed the 2 cups, dried them, and set them mouth down on the rack. Then I wiped the counter slowly, once, twice, as if clearing crumbs could also clear the fog in my home. It couldn't, but it readied my hands for what came next. The knock came on a Sunday afternoon, gentle but deliberate. When I opened the door, there she was, Helen, my daughter-in-law's mother, my son Ethan's other mom. She stood wrapped in a sable coat, snowflakes melting in her silver hair. In her hands she carried a bakery box tied with a red ribbon. Dorothy, darling, she sang, stepping inside without waiting for me to answer. I thought we moms deserved a little tea together. I brought pecan pie. Your favorite. The house was unusually quiet. Ethan, my son, had taken Clara, my daughter-in-law, and the grandkids skating. No patter of little feet, no voices calling Grandma Dot. Just me, and now Helen, filling the silence with her perfume and her plans. I set out the cups and plates the china Tom's sister had gifted us on our 20th anniversary. Helen hummed softly, arranging napkins as though she owned the table, her every gesture practiced. For a few minutes we spoke like 2 mothers, 2 grandmothers, chatting about snow, decorations, and how quickly children grow. But beneath her smile I could see it, the real reason she had come. When her tea cooled enough, she set the cup down with care and leaned in. Her voice softened, sweet as syrup. Dorothy, you've worked so hard all your life. You've carried the weight of everything. House, bills, family. Don't you think it's time to let go of some of that? I tilted my head, smiling politely. Let go? She nodded, her fingers tapping the rim of her teacup. You know, these houses, they require upkeep. Taxes, insurance, all those documents. It's too much for one person at our age. Wouldn't it be easier if Ethan handled those responsibilities? The air between us thickened. My pulse quickened, but I kept my voice light. You think so? Helen smiled warmly, as though suggesting a spa trip instead of a financial transfer. Of course. You'd still live here, obviously. Nothing would change for you. But if you put the deed in Ethan's name, everything becomes simpler. Bills streamlined, decisions easier. One less worry for you, dear Simpler. Easier. For whom? I thought. My chest tightened. She reached across the table, touching my wrist. You've earned rest, Dorothy. You shouldn't be bogged down with property forms. Let the next generation carry the weight. That's how families move forward. The kettle on the stove let out a faint hiss, almost like a warning. I forced a small laugh. You do make it sound tempting, Helen. To finally be light as air, her eyes gleamed, satisfied. She pressed on. Exactly. Think of it as a gift to Ethan. He's already shown how much he loves you. Remember the BMW? That was his way of saying thank you. This is yours to give back. A cycle of love, I smiled, though every muscle in my face wanted to betray me. You're right. A cycle of love, she says. My mind hissed. Number. It's a cycle of debt, deceit, and signatures waiting to erase me. Helen squeezed my wrist again, mistaking my silence for agreement. We'll talk more soon. I can even bring some paperwork just to review. No pressure, but I know you'll see it's for the best. She rose, smoothing her coat. Thank you for tea, Dorothy. You really are the heart of this family. I walked her to the door, smiling until it closed. Then I stood in the hallway, still tasting pecan pie, but feeling bile rise in my throat. She wants my home, my life, wrapped in ribbons and called a gift. But she doesn't know yet. This house has weathered storms stronger than her smile. The snow outside had thickened into a white veil. Inside, I set Helen's untouched slice of a pie into the trash, the fork sinking with a dull thud. My smile faded with it. The game was no longer subtle. The invitation had been extended, and I had pretended to accept. But in truth, I was already sharpening my answer. The next morning, the snow had crusted over, sharp and brittle underfoot. I tucked the manila folder under my arm, loan statement, sticky note, brochure, and drove to the brick building where Margaret Patterson kept her office. Margaret wasn't just a lawyer. She had been the one to draft Tom's will, the woman who guided us through estate taxes after he died. If anyone could help me untangle what was happening now, it was her. The waiting room smelled of coffee and paper. A clerk in a navy blazer led me into Margaret's office, lined with shelves of law books and family photos. She rose from her desk, adjusting her glasses. Dorothy, she said, concern flickering across her face, what brings you here on such a cold morning? I laid the folder on her desk. I need to see any documents filed under my name in the last 6 months, especially anything involving property, power of attorney, or my house. She nodded and tapped at her keyboard. The silence stretched as the printer began whirring. My hands tightened around my teacup as I waited. Finally, Margaret slid a document across the desk. This was recorded at the county clerk's office 3 weeks ago. My eyes fixed on the bold heading, Power of Attorney. The room seemed to shrink around me. It bore my name, my signature, the date, December 2nd, the grantee, Ethan Miller, my son. This gives Ethan full authority, Margaret explained quietly, over your financial affairs, including property transfers, loans, even selling the house outright if he chooses. It's notarized, witnessed, and appears completely valid. I studied the signature. It was mine, but not mine. The D curved too neatly. The Y in Dorothy ended in a single loop, where I always doubled. My stomach turned. That's not my hand, I whispered. I never signed this. I never authorized this, Margaret folded her hands. Then it's forgery, Dorothy. A serious felony. Whoever filed this forged your consent to give Ethan legal control. I thought of Ethan, his tired eyes, the clumsy way he tried to lie, his desperation with the loan. Number. My son isn't clever enough for this. He doesn't even know how to spell notary without help. Someone guided him. Someone staged this. And in my mind's eye, I saw Helen, her careful smiles, her coaxing words about letting go and simplifying, the credit union sticky note, the talk of consolidating. Margaret's voice cut through my thoughts. Dorothy, with this on file, Ethan could technically sell your home tomorrow. The county records would back him. Your bank accounts too, if tied to property. Has he mentioned any refinancing? Refinancing, I repeated, the word tasting bitter. No, Ethan hasn't. But Helen has. Helen with her tidy paperwork and confident tone. Helen who talks about leverage as if it were love. I set the paper back on the desk, my hands trembling. Margaret, I need proof. Real proof that this wasn't me. She nodded firmly. We can request handwriting analysis. We can subpoena the notary. If the signature is forged, we'll find the cracks. But you must be careful, Dorothy. Whoever filed this thinks they've already won. I pressed my palm flat against the forged signature, as though I could smother it. They haven't won yet. The fluorescent light buzzed overhead. Outside, a plow scraped the street clean. Inside, I realized this wasn't just manipulation or sweet talk anymore. This was theft dressed in legal ink, and while my son's name was on the line, the hand that guided the pen was Helen's. That night, the house was too quiet. Snow pressed against the windows, muting the world, while the grandfather clock marked each second with a sound that felt heavier than ever. I sat at the dining room table with a single lamp glowing, Tom's photograph propped against the sugar jar. It was from our early years, his arm slung around me, both of us too young to know how hard life would be, but determined to face it anyway. Tom, I whispered, tracing the glass, they're trying to take our home. The memories came uninvited. Summer of 1984, Tom hammering nails into fresh beams, sweat darkening his shirt. The house wasn't even finished, but we walked through the skeleton of walls with sandwiches in hand, imagining where the kids' rooms would be. 1991. I clipped coupons, saved every nickel, skipped new shoes for myself so we could cover the mortgage. $425 a month back then. We celebrated each payment with coffee and chipped mugs, saying, one step closer to owning it outright. 2007. The furnace broke again. $3,200 for a new one. We patched the budget, cut cable, and fixed it ourselves on weekends. Tom's back ached for days, but he grinned. At least we kept our roof over our heads, Dot. Every repair, every sacrifice was a brick we laid together. Not just a house, our life's work. Now, sitting under that dim light, I stared at the man who had once stood shoulder to shoulder with me, and the fury burned hotter than fear. They forged my name, Tom. They think they can erase me with a pen stroke. I felt tears sting, but I refused to let them fall. Tears wouldn't hold up walls. Resolve would. Part of me wanted to crumble. What if they succeed? What if Ethan signed something without understanding? What if the law believes their papers over my truth? The questions clawed at me, hungry. But another voice rose louder, the one that carried me through night shifts, through Tom's funeral, through the winters when blankets weren't enough. You've never quit, Dorothy, not once. You don't quit now. I straightened in my chair. No one steals this house, I said out loud, voice steady. Not while I'm breathing. The clock ticked, slow and certain, like an ally keeping time. I pulled out a notebook and began to write. Steps, evidence, people I could call, the forged signature, the loan statement. Helen's words over tea. Every detail mattered. By the time midnight passed, the first page of my plan was full. I closed the notebook, resting my palm on Tom's picture. From victim to fighter, Tom. That's what I have to be now, and in that silence, in the glow of one lamp and the weight of years behind me, Dorothy Miller, the woman everyone thought was just an aging mother, turned into something else entirely. A guardian, a strategist. A storm is waiting for the right moment. The following Thursday, the dining room lights glowed softly against the winter dark. I laid out coffee cups and a plate of shortbread, the way a mother might for a family discussion. But this wasn't a family discussion. It was an ambush, dressed in lace doilies. When the doorbell rang, Ethan entered first, his tie slightly crooked, eyes darting like a boy caught sneaking cigarettes. Clara followed, clutching her purse with both hands, hesitant. And finally Helen swept in, calm as a queen, her perfume arriving before her words. Dorothy, dear, she said warmly, kissing my cheek. So glad you're willing to talk this through. I smiled, thin and careful. Yes, sit down, Helen. Pour your confidence all over my table. The more you speak, the deeper you bury yourself. Helen unfolded a leather folder, crisp documents spilling across the table. Here, she said smoothly. The proposed transfer of deed. The power of attorney. Oh, Ethan already has that, of course, but this just formalizes it. My heart thudded, but I kept my face serene. Lay out your tricks in daylight. Every sheet of paper is another nail in your coffin. Ethan cleared his throat. Mom, it'll make things easier. Property taxes, maintenance, insurance. You won't have to lift a finger. His hands shook slightly as he slid the papers toward me. I placed my reading glasses on deliberately. Easier for me or easier for someone else? Clara shifted uncomfortably, finally speaking. Dot, it's not like that. This way, if anything happens to you, everything transitions smoothly. No probate court, no delays. It's efficient, I thought bitterly. Always efficiency, never affection. A convenient word for taking without asking. I tapped the edge of the folder. So, walk me through the numbers. Mortgage balance, property taxes, Ethan's loan. How does this all fit together? For a moment, silence. Ethan's eyes flickered to Helen. She leaned forward, her voice velvet. Dorothy, you don't need the details. The whole point is to lighten your burden. Just trust us. We'll handle everything. I kept my tone airy, as if pondering. Still, I'd like to see it in black and white. Humor me, for an old woman's peace of mind. Helen's smile tightened, but she produced another sheet. Payment schedules, refinancing projections, sloppy numbers scrawled over neat tables. Perfect, I told myself. Give me your handwriting, your notes, your confidence. You think I'm too frail to question you, but I'm building a case with every careless flourish of your pen. The clock chimed 7. I closed the folder gently. Well, I said, you've given me much to consider. I'll need to sleep on it. Helen reached across the table, patting my hand like she had done before. Of course. Take your time, but don't wait too long. Opportunities don't linger forever. Her words dripped with rehearsed sweetness, but my recorder caught every syllable, every reference to forged documents, every whisper of urgency. As they left, Ethan kissed my cheek, his stubble scratched, his hands still trembling. Clara murmured, "Thank you," as if relieved the conversation was over. And Helen, last to go, turned back at the door with that triumphant smile. The door closed. The silence returned. I walked straight to the buffet, turned the phone over, and pressed stop. The file saved instantly, time-stamped, clear, admissible. I let out a long breath. They think I'm stumbling into their snare, but it's the other way around. Tonight wasn't their victory. Tonight, I set the board. And for once, I'm the hunter, not the prey. For the first time in weeks, I felt the smallest spark of triumph. They thought I was the mouse in their trap. But the truth was, I had just set my own. The next morning, I dialed his office. Chen and Associates, a young woman answered. This is Dorothy Miller from Virginia, I said, keeping my voice warm, grandmotherly. I wondered if Mr. Chen offers consultations about potential misuse of power of attorney. Her tone shifted, professional now. Yes, ma'am. He has dealt with many cases like that. Let me schedule a 30-minute call. Tomorrow at 2 p.m. EST, I agreed, heart-thudding. The video call connected the next day. A tidy office appeared behind him. Dark wood shelves, neatly arranged casebooks. He looked younger than I expected, mid-30s, sharp-eyed, with the calm confidence of a man used to winning. Mrs. Miller, he said kindly, what brings you to me today? I hesitated, then chose caution. Suppose someone filed a power of attorney under your name without your consent. What does that mean, legally? He leaned forward, hands steepled. It means fraud. In Virginia, as in most states, a valid power of attorney requires your actual signature and proper notarization. If either is falsified, that's forgery, a felony. More importantly, any transactions made under that forged POA can be challenged and reversed, but the danger is immediate. Once it's recorded at the county clerk's office, banks and buyers treat it as valid until proven otherwise. I nodded, swallowing. And if family pressures someone, suggesting it's for the best, pushing them to sign? That's called undue influence, he said without hesitation. If it involves transferring property or changing deeds, courts treat it seriously. We look at capacity, intent, and coercion. Sometimes manipulation is harder to prove than a forged signature, but recordings, documents, and witness statements make a case airtight. Recordings. Yes. I had them. For a moment I stared at his face, sharp, intelligent, and hers. The same bone structure, the same careful eyes. I drew a breath. Brian, it isn't hypothetical. Someone forged my signature. They've already filed it with the county. He frowned. Do you have a copy? I held up the scanned document to the camera. He leaned in, eyes narrowing. The loop on the notary seal placement. Yes, this is highly suspicious. His jaw tightened. Mrs. Miller, this is exactly the kind of fraud I prosecute. I let the silence stretch, then said softly, Brian, it's your mother. The words hung like smoke. He didn't move at first, just stared. His face drained of color. Finally, he whispered, That's not possible. I pushed on. I have the recording of her urging me to transfer my deed. I have notes in her handwriting, and now, this forged POA with Ethan's name as beneficiary. Ethan's too clumsy to engineer this. But Helen knows what she's doing. Brian exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. I've seen cons like this, but never thought I'd see it tied to my own family. He sat back, eyes clouded. If you're right, Mrs. Miller, this isn't just forgery. It's elder financial exploitation, a federal offense if the assets cross state lines. Federal offense. The words struck like church bells. Serious, undeniable, unerasable. I don't want my son in prison, I whispered, but I won't let Helen take my home. Brian nodded slowly. Then here's what we do. Keep gathering evidence. Keep recording. Copy every document she puts in front of you. I'll guide you on what's admissible and what prosecutors need. But, Dorothy, he hesitated, then added, if my mother truly did this, I won't protect her. I protect victims, even when the criminal shares my blood. After the call, I closed the laptop and sat back. Relief warred with dread. I had an ally now, one I never expected. But I also knew if Helen discovered I'd turned her own son against her, the game would shift from subtle smiles to open war. I looked around my quiet kitchen at Tom's photo still watching from the mantel. Looks like I've got backup, Tom, I murmured, but the fight's only just begun. The dining room smelled of roast chicken and rosemary, but the air was heavy, like a storm waiting to break. My son Ethan sat at the head of the table, shifting in his chair. Clara placed mashed potatoes on the children's plates, trying to keep the mood light. Across from me, Helen smiled like a queen presiding over her court. Family dinner, except this wasn't about food. This was about power. We had barely finished grace when Helen struck the first chord. Ethan, dear, she said smoothly, once the title is settled, you'll feel so much lighter. And, Dorothy, she turned to me with that too sweet smile, you'll finally be free of responsibility. I set down my fork. Free of responsibility? Or free of my home? Ethan cleared his throat. Mom, that's not what she means. It's just, if you transferred the deed, everything would be streamlined. Streamlined, I thought. A pretty word for erased. I folded my hands calm. Streamlined how exactly? Taxes? Insurance? Or your loan balance of $58,700? The fork froze in Ethan's hand. Clara's eyes flicked to him, startled. And for a moment I saw it, the crack. Helen smoothed her napkin, unfazed. Dorothy, is simple math. If Ethan holds the deed, he can refinance the mortgage. With today's rates, 6.9% fixed, it could consolidate his existing debt. That's thousands saved annually. Why let money slip through your fingers when equity could be working for the family? I smiled politely. Equity is a tricky thing. You borrow against your house today, and tomorrow it's not wealth. It's a leash. Inside, I was burning. Good. Keep talking, Helen. Walk me through your scheme in front of my family. Every word you speak tightens the rope you think you're tying around me, but it's actually around your own neck. The children ate quietly, sensing the tension. Clara finally whispered, Maybe it's worth considering, Dot. Probate can be so hard, and Ethan... I cut in gently. Probate is only hard when a will is contested, and mine won't be. Not anymore. Helen's smile faltered for half a second. She recovered quickly, leaning forward. Dorothy, you're overcomplicating. Families succeed by moving assets smoothly from one generation to the next. This is just good planning. I set my glass down, steady. Good planning is saving every coupon to pay the mortgage. It's repairing a furnace instead of taking a second loan. Planning is what Tom and I did for 30 years. What you're describing is not planning, Helen. It's leverage. And leverage cuts both ways. Her jaw tightened. Ethan shifted again, eyes darting. Mom, please. Don't make this harder than it has to be. I turned to him, my voice soft. Harder? Ethan, I raised you through harder. Harder was paying a $425 mortgage with 2 kids in school and a husband laid off. This? I gestured to the papers Helen had slid onto the table. This is someone trying to dress theft as efficiency. The clock ticked, silence spread. Then I slid my phone onto the table, face down, casual. Good thing I like keeping records. Helps me remember the details. Helen's eyes flicked to the phone. For the first time, her smile looked forced. Dinner ended with an untouched pie and forced goodbyes. The children hugged me tight. Clara avoided my eyes. Ethan looked tired, guilty. And Helen? She left with her head high, but her glance at my phone told me she had felt the trap closing. As the door shut, I whispered to myself, "War has begun." But this time, I'm not fighting empty-handed. The house was quiet after dinner, the kind of quiet that comes not from peace but from words left unsaid. I had just finished rinsing the dishes when a knock came on the kitchen doorway. Helen. She leaned against the frame, arms folded, no smile this time. Gone was the sugary voice from supper. What stood there was sharp, cold steel. "Dorothy," she said evenly, "we should speak." Alone, I dried my hands slowly, refusing to show nerves. "All right." We sat at the kitchen table, the same table where Tom and I once mapped out grocery budgets and mortgage payments, down to the last dime. Now it was a battlefield. Helen leaned forward. "Let's not dance around it. Once a power of attorney is recorded, it's as good as law. Your son already has it. Fighting us only makes things messy. Why waste the little time you have left on earth with lawyers and courts?" I felt my jaw tighten. So there it is. No sugar, no smile, just the thief admitting the theft. Aloud, I answered calmly, "Interesting you'd say that, Helen." Because I've spoken to someone who knows this area of law very well. Her eyes narrowed. "What do you mean?" I held her gaze. Forgery, undue influence, elder financial exploitation. Serious crimes, aren't they? For the first time, Helen's mask cracked, her lips pressed tight. Then she hissed, "No one will believe a frail old woman over signed and sealed documents." Court side with paper, Dorothy. Not with shaky memories. Inside, my heart kicked, but I forced a smile. "Thank you, Helen. You've just confessed exactly what I needed." Because beneath my sweater sleeve, the small recorder in my pocket blinked red. Every venomous word was being saved. Legally, cleanly. I leaned back, steady. "You underestimate me, Helen." "Always have. You think 30 years of building this home taught me nothing about protecting it? You think I lived through layoffs, medical bills, and burying my husband only to roll over for you?" She straightened, fury flashing in her eyes. "Careful, Dorothy. Families can drown in paperwork when things go to court. Paperwork. Yes. But also recordings, witnesses, truth." I let her words hang in the air, then whispered, "Better paperwork than regret." She left without another word, heels striking hard against the floorboards. The sound echoed long after the door shut. Alone again, I rested my hand on the recorder in my pocket. My heart was racing, but my mind was clear. It's no longer just about my house, Tom. It's about saving Ethan before she drags him under. I won't let our son drown in her schemes. Not while I'm still breathing. That night, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of Helen. I pitied her. Because she had no idea the war she thought she was winning was already slipping through her fingers. That afternoon, I dialed Brian Chen. His voice came through steady, professional. "Mrs. Miller, have you gathered more material?" "Yes," I said, flipping through the folder. Signed drafts, notes in her handwriting, and multiple recordings. Time-stamped, clear, Brian exhaled. "Good. Courts don't dismiss this kind of evidence. Virginia law recognizes electronic recordings if at least one party consents. You did, so they're admissible. And handwritten notes, even drafts, can prove intent. That's the foundation of a fraud case." I wrote his words down. Admissible, intent, foundation. He continued, "But you'll need more. Helen will claim she acted out of concern. We have to show she stood to gain directly. Bank records, appraisals, loan applications, anything tying her to financial benefit." I felt a slow smile form. "I have Ethan's second mortgage statement, and Helen's fingerprints are all over the refinancing projections. She didn't even bother to hide it." "Perfect," Brian said. "Dorothy, this isn't just a defense anymore. This is a prosecution waiting to happen." That night, I called Ethan. My voice was calm, almost gentle. "Son, I'd like us all to sit together again soon." This time, I want Helen to bring every paper she has. And you, Clara, you should both be there. He hesitated. Mom, I don't think... Ethan, I said softly, you owe me that much. After 35 years of sacrifice, you owe me the courtesy of one honest table silence. Then a defeated sigh. All right. One more dinner. But Mom, please don't make it a fight. Oh, Ethan, I thought. The fight already began the moment you handed her my future on a platter. Later, I sat before Tom's photo again. The lamplight flickered across his smile. They think they're cornering me, Tom. But really, I've been cornering them. One document at a time. One careless word at a time, I trace the edge of his frame. Next time we sit at that table, Helen won't be the only one with an agenda. I'll have Brian listening quietly, ready to strike with the law. And when the trap closes, she'll realize she underestimated the wrong old woman. The snow kept falling outside, muffling the world, but inside me a fire had already started. The lines were drawn, and soon the battlefield would be the same table where Helen once thought she had already won. Snow feathered against the dining room window. Inside, the table was set, but no one touched the roast. Ethan stared at his folded hands. Clara clutched a napkin like a lifeline. Helen arrived last, composed, the kind of smile you wear to a closing. Dorothy, she purred, sliding a folder forward. These are the updated papers. Title transfer, a simple quitclaim deed, and the... Let's go through them together, I said, with an extra set of eyes. I turned the laptop toward the center of the table. A face appeared. Brian Chen, dark suit, steady gaze. Mom? Clara whispered, confused. Ethan blinked. Helen went very still. Then her smile tightened. Good evening, Brian said, professional, neutral. I'm here as an independent advisor to Mrs. Miller. Helen's chin lifted. Brian, darling, this is a family matter. You don't need to involve yourself. He didn't flinch. Forged power of attorney isn't a family matter. It's a felony. His voice was quiet, deadly precise. And what I'm looking at, Mrs. Nguyen, the loop on the Y, the notary seal alignment, the recording at the county 3 weeks ago, points to forgery and undue influence. The room contracted. Somewhere in the house, the grandfather clock ticked. 1, 2, 3. I slid a page to the center, the recorded and stamped POA with my counterfeit signature, then another, Ethan's $58,700 loan. I tapped my phone and the dining room filled with Helen's voice from last night. Sweet, confident, cornering. Don't wait too long. Opportunities don't linger forever. Once Ethan holds the deed, refinancing consolidates debt. You'll finally be free of responsibility. Clara's breath hitched. Ethan's knuckles whitened. Helen's eyes flashed. Brian's tone stayed surgical. Mrs. Miller's recordings are admissible in Virginia. Her copies of draft notes show intent. Your proposals tie you directly to the financial benefit. If filed, we'll move to void the POA, notify the clerk, and petition for an injunction against any transfer, and we will refer the matter for prosecution. Helen's veneer cracked. Enough with theatrics. I was protecting the family. Dorothy can't manage a property alone forever. I offered efficiency. I met her eyes. You offered erasure. Silence fell hard. Ethan found his voice. Mom, Helen, did you forge my mother's name? She didn't answer. The not answer roared louder than any denial. Clara's napkin trembled in her fist. Mom, tell me you didn't. Helen's gaze flicked from the laptop to me, calculating, then cooling into something like contempt. You've all misunderstood. I did what needed to be done. Assets should be leveraged by the ones who know how. Dorothy? She said my name like a diagnosis. You sit on equity like it's a museum piece. I was making it work. I felt the rage rise and pass, like a wave breaking and pulling back into calm water. I stood, resting a hand on Tom's empty chair. Helen, I said steady, I know exactly who you are. A woman who once made a risky bet on a Richmond townhome, lost $50,000, watched her credit drop 19 points, and decided she would never feel that small again. You stitched pride to survival and called it strategy. You see aging as a cliff and money as the railing. I understand fear, her jaw clenched. But fear wrapped in silk is still fear, and when you used my son's debt and my grief to pry at my door, That wasn't protection. That was theft, done with a pen and a smile. I looked at Ethan. Son, you wanted to be the man who saves everyone. You bought a car to buy proof. You almost sold your mother to buy peace. His eyes filled. He nodded once, ashamed. I turned back to Helen. We are both mothers. That should have been our common ground. I raised my boy on patched coats and $425 mortgage payments, on coupons, and a $3,200 furnace repair we paid in cash because debt is a leash. You raised your daughter to believe love is leverage and leverage is love. That's not how families move forward. That's how they fall apart. I slid the forged POA back toward her. Paper is not love. Titles are not love. A house is not a ladder you climb by stepping on the woman who built it. I breathed in, let it out. Here's the part you didn't plan for. I forgive your fear. I do. I won't carry your hunger for status in my bones. But forgiveness is not forgetting, and it is not surrender. I will protect what Tom and I made. I will protect my son from the kind of shortcuts that hollow a man out from the inside. Brian's voice came through, low. Mrs. Nguyen, you can return what you've taken. Every document, every draft, or you can face this in court. Either way, the game you've been playing ends tonight. Helen stared at the laptop, at Brian, her own son made of straight lines and hard truths, and something inside her sagged. Not repentance, recognition. The finish line had moved beyond her reach. For a heartbeat, the room held all our histories. My patched winters, Ethan's desperate swagger, Clara's need to make her mother proud, Helen's terror of slipping. I gave her the lesson I needed to say out loud, for all of us. We are what we choose when no one is applauding. Tonight I choose to be more than the woman you misjudged. I choose to be a wall you cannot move and a door you cannot fake your way through. And I choose to teach my family that love is a ledger only when it's paid in honesty. Helen's eyes glittered. Pride fought panic. She gathered the leather folder with shaking hands and stood and smoothed her coat. This isn't over, she tried, but even she didn't believe it. It is, I said, not unkindly. At least the part where you write my story. She held Brian's gaze on the screen a breath too long, then looked away. Without another word, she turned and walked out. The front door opened, closed, and the winter night swallowed her footsteps. For a long time, no one spoke. Then Ethan reached for my hand like he used to when he was small. Clara wiped her eyes. On the laptop, Brian exhaled. Mrs. Miller. Dorothy. I'll file the notices in the morning. Thank you, I said. My voice was tired, but it didn't shake. I looked around my dining room, our dining room. The roast had gone cold, but the house felt warmer than it had in months. The trap had sprung, yes. But more than that, something mean and small had been pushed out of our walls. I touched Tom's chair. We kept the roof, love, I whispered. And maybe, just maybe, we kept our boy. By 9:12 a.m., my kitchen table was a command center again. Brian called in from Seattle. Margaret, my local attorney, sat across from me with a legal pad and a pen that never seemed to stop moving. We file 3 things today, Margaret said. First, affidavit of forgery, your sworn statement that the POA isn't yours. Second, a notice of revocation, to kill any authority they claim. Third, a motion for temporary injunction, to freeze any transfer of your home. Brian added steady and clinical, Virginia's a one-party consent state. Your recordings are admissible. We'll attach a transcript excerpt to show undue influence and intent. I signed until my hand cramped. Full name, middle initial. The loops on my Y doubled exactly as they've always been. At 10:03 a.m., Margaret notarized the stack. At 10:47 a.m., we were at the county clerk. A clerk stamped the affidavit, received 1058, and flagged my parcel number. Any deed or lien hitting this property gets held until a judge rules, she said, sliding the receipt under glass. Back in the hallway, Margaret emailed certified copies to my bank's legal department, revocation of POA, affidavit of forgery, and the clerk's receipt. Your accounts are now talk to owner only, she said. No one moves a dime without you. By 2:15 p.m., Brian messaged, injunction set for hearing Friday 9 a.m. I also filed a lis pendens, clouds the title. No buyer or lender will touch that house now. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled without tasting panic. The door Helen tried to pry open had just been bolted from the inside and posted with a sign the law could read. That afternoon, Margaret spread a clean folder across the table. Next, we build walls, not just locks. I want your home an irrevocable living trust. She sketched it out in plain English. You'll be trustee now. When you pass, a successor trustee, someone not named Ethan or Helen, follows your written instructions. Benefits, no probate, fewer excuses for emergency transfers, and, she tapped the page, we can write a clause, no sale, mortgage, or title change without 2 signatures. Trustee plus independent co-signer. We drafted names. I chose Margaret as a co-signer and my church friend Louise as backup. We added a spendthrift provision, no beneficiary can pledge the house as collateral, and a no leverage clause. No equity line, cash out refinance, or reverse mortgage, absent written certification of independent counsel. 2 hours later, I signed the trust agreement and a 1-page certificate of trust, the paper you record so you don't have to disclose every private term. Margaret booked the recorder's office for the next morning to retitle the deed Dorothy M. Miller, trustee of the Miller Revocable Trust dated today's date. Also, Brian said on speaker, place fraud alerts and credit freezes at the bureaus. If someone even sneezes near your credit, you'll get a ping. We did it together, Experian, Equifax, TransUnion, confirmation codes scribbled in my notebook like tiny shields. The house felt heavier somehow, rooted, and I felt it too. Not a victim camping under a roof, a guardian standing inside a citadel she built. That evening, I asked Ethan and Clara to come over. No roast, no pie, just water glasses, folded hands, and the truth. Ethan stared at the wood grain. Mom, I'm sorry. His voice was small. I thought the refinance would fix everything. The $58,700 was supposed to be temporary. The BMW, he swallowed. I told myself it was commitment, proof we were moving up. I was drowning. I let him finish before I spoke. Son, men drown because they won't call for a rope. Not because there isn't one, Clara wiped at her eyes. I pushed him. I wanted Mom to feel proud of me. I thought if we put her on the title, everything would look stable to the bank. I didn't see what that meant for you. Here's what it means from now on, I said, sliding a single sheet across the table. House rules for money, handwritten, plain. 1, no loans in my name. 2, no conversations about my house without my lawyer present. 3, if you need help, you ask. In daylight with documents, and we bring in a neutral third party. 4, love is not collateral. Ethan nodded, tears shining. We'll sell the BMW, he said. List it this weekend. I'll meet with a counselor and a budget coach. No more shortcuts, Clara reached for my hand. We'll do therapy. For us. For how we got here. My voice softened. I love you both. I'm not a bank. I'm a mother. If you forget the difference again, we'll sit at this table and remember. For once, the quiet felt like peace, not fear. By Thursday morning, the gears had caught. The clerk's office emailed, POA flagged for investigation. The notary who witnessed my signature had been contacted. Brian filed our packet with the Commonwealth's attorney, forged POA, transcript excerpts, Helen's handwritten refi projections, and the timeline linking her advice to Ethan's debt. 2 tracks now, Brian explained. Civil, void the POA, permanent injunction, fees. Criminal, forgery, uttering a forged instrument, attempted theft by deception, and elder financial exploitation. She could make restitution offers, but the record stands. He paused. Dorothy, if asked, you'll tell the truth, calmly. No vengeance. Juries believe clarity. That afternoon, Helen's number flashed on my phone. I let it ring to voicemail. Later, I listened. Breathless, brittle. Dorothy, we can fix this. Pull the filings. We'll reset. I saved the message. Evidence is evidence, even when it begs. At 4:26 p.m., Brian texted, Injunction granted pending hearing. List pendants recorded. She can't move the house. The wall is up. I set the phone down and looked around my living room. The lamp Tom loved, the dent in his chair, the bay window where David reads comic books. The house didn't feel like a prize I'd defended. It felt like a promise I was keeping. Outside, the snow had stopped. The sky was the clear, hard blue you only get after a storm. Sunday felt like a clean page. No folders on the table, no signatures to fear, just chicken soup steaming on the stove and fresh bread cooling on a rack. Ethan carried Tom's old armchair into the living room. The leather scuffed, the right armrest split along a tired seam. "I'll fix it, Mom," he said, voice thick. He set the wood clamp, dabbed glue into the crack, and tapped a finishing nail. The soft talk sounded like an apology turned into work. When the joint held, he exhaled and rested his forehead on the chair as if it were a shoulder. "I thought buying a car would make me a provider," he whispered. "I forgot the first job is to show up and tell the truth." Clara stood beside me with a small notebook. "I wrote it all down," she said. Inside were columns, income, debts, dates, numbers honest enough to sting. A folded page fell out, a 3-page letter in her careful hand. I tried to buy pride for my mother with money that wasn't mine. I forgot yours was earned with patched winters and a $425 mortgage. Please let me earn back trust one receipt at a time. She didn't ask for a hug, but when I opened my arms, she came quietly, like a daughter tired of being brave in the wrong direction. David climbed onto the bay window ledge and cleared his throat, solemn as a little judge. He read from the sheet I'd taped to the wall, House Rules for Money, in the wobbly voice of a boy trying to sound grown. 1. No loans in Grandma's name. 2. No talking about Grandma's house without Grandma's lawyer. 3. If you need help, ask in daylight with papers. 4. He looked up. Love is not collateral. He frowned. Grandma, what's collateral again? I brushed a crumb from his cheek. It's something people give away when they're scared. Love is never that. We set one small thing right, too. I placed the $20 voucher, that silly, stinging slip, into a frame and slid it onto the shelf beside the new trust binder. 2 pieces of paper, the same size, different weights. One said I was easy to overlook. The other said I learned to lock my doors from the inside. I touched Tom's chair. The seam held. So did we. Dusk turned the snow outside to blue glass. My phone buzzed on the table. A text from Brian, "It's done." The injunction, the revocation, the cloud on the title, ink drying where it mattered. The danger had a line through it now. I stood on the porch, breath mixing with the cold, and let a few sentences rise back the note through the quiet. Paper is not love. Love is not collateral. I will not endure being erased. I didn't win because I was louder or younger. I won because I stood up straight when someone tried to fold me. Because I chose, over and over, to be the wall no one could shove and the door no one could forge their way through. That is what freedom looks like at 70. Not permission, but authority. Not asking to be seen, but seeing myself and acting accordingly. If you're listening, especially you silver-haired women who have held families together with coupons, casseroles, and midnight prayers, let this be your reminder. When someone says loud, "Let the next generation handle it," ask, with love or with signatures. When someone sells leverage as loyalty, remember, a lever can lift you or pry you open. You are allowed to say no. You are allowed to love without co-signing. You are allowed to guard the house that holds your memories and call that guarding love. I went back inside, past the framed voucher and the trust papers, past the chair with its mended seam. On the wall, David's lopsided banner fluttered in the furnace breeze. House Rules for Money. Under the end table sat a small tin with labeled USB drives, recordings, copies, facts. Not to threaten. To remember, vigilance is another form of tenderness. Night settled softly. I set a cup of tea on Tom's armrest and rested my hand there too. If I had to tie the whole storm to one sentence, I would choose this. Real love doesn't need a red bow or a notary seal. It needs a straight back, a clear voice, and a woman who will stand on her own side. So, that's how the story ends. If this made you think, or if you've lived through something similar, share your thoughts in the comments. Our channel is a space for sharing tales of the elderly and family revenge stories from people who have weathered life's storms. Subscribe for more, because sometimes the deepest form of revenge is simply living on your own terms.